collecting Pokémon. That's essentially what any game in the Pokémon franchise is about. Exploring the world, meeting the characters, and becoming the champion is all well and good, but building your own team and throwing it at the challenges ahead of you is what turned this franchise into a multimedia hit. Maybe you spend time building the most efficient team with the perfect type coverage, role distributions, and stat spreads. Or maybe you just pick your favorites and see how far you can get. Even in the anime, strong characters are defined by having plenty strong Pokémon. At the end of the day, I bet that the vast majority of Pokémon players finish their journeys owning at the very least a full party's worth of Pokémon, with maybe a couple of extras on the PC. So what would happen if we took this core concept that has held strong for more than 25 years, and we did our very best to subvert it? What if we tried to beat every game with the absolute smallest teams we're allowed to use? How many Pokémon do you need to beat the Pokémon franchise? I was surprised by how little info on this there is on the internet. The closest thing I found was this Quora article, and even then the top answer doesn't specify the actual number.
Step it up, Andrew.
It's so interesting to me that at a moment where YouTube is filled with challenge runs, no one has thought to do this one yet. So, where do we start? How about by setting some ground rules? For this challenge, I'll need to go through one game from each of the current 9 generations while owning the least amount of Pokémon possible. Starter Pokémon, Pokémon caught in the wild, gift Pokémon, they all count in the context of this challenge. If it takes up space in the party or box, then it counts. Since the remakes might have different strategies, I'm also gonna try to go through one of each of those as well. That makes 13 games, 9 mainline games and 4 remakes. I'm also going to collect all 8 badges in the games that have them. While that sounds obvious since you need them to beat the games, that's just to prevent using glitches that allow you to skip the whole game, as that would defeat the whole purpose of this challenge. Looking at you, Gen 1, what I want to have at the end of this challenge is the smallest possible collection of Pokémon that can beat at least one game of each generation. So before we get into it, let's look into this theoretically. You really only need one Pokémon to beat every trainer in each game. You didn't need me to tell you that, you've seen the hundreds of solo challenges on this website, and on your first playthrough all those years ago, I bet you will use your starter too. However, there's one aspect of Pokémon games that, at least for the earlier ones, makes a one Pokémon challenge very difficult. HM moves. For those who don't know, HM moves are field moves that a Pokémon can use to traverse or remove some kind of obstacle in the overworld that blocks the player's progression. They are often optional, except when they aren't. Yes, every generation up until the one that removed them, Generation 7, has a certain amount of required gems that are needed to actually get to the end of the game, and like with other moves, each of them can only be learned by certain Pokémon, and they don't always overlap. You're also given a lot of Pokémon against your will, especially in the later games, and they also count. Minimizing these is gonna be the biggest part of this challenge. Anyway, enough stalling. Let's start from the beginning, Gen 1. There are 3 games available in this generation, Red, Blue and Yellow. Red and Blue are virtually the same for this challenge. However, the only NGM move Pikachu can learn is Flash, which isn't even required, so we won't be going for that one. So I picked Pokemon Red, though Blue should also be possible in this case. That's because 3 gems are required to beat these games: Cut, Strength, and Surf. Venusaur can only learn Cut, Charizard can learn Cut and Strength, and Blastoise can learn Surf and Strength. So no matter what starter I pick, I'll have to catch another Pokemon somewhere to learn the rest of the moves. I went with Charmander because, well, I mean, come on. But the other starters should also work. The first half of the game is basically just like a solo challenge. I used Charmander to plow through all the traders and gyms. I just had to avoid both the Magikarp salesman and reviving any of the fossils I picked up along the way, as well as catching Pokemon, of course. I also had to teach Charizard Cut to be able to fight Lieutenant Surge, as well as move on to Route 9. After getting through Pokemon Tower and obtaining the Pokéflute, I got access to the rest of Route 12. including the house of the third fishing guru, who gave me the super rod. This is important, as with it I can get my second Pokemon, Krabby. I picked Krabby as my second Pokemon because it is unique in Gen 1 as a Pokemon who can learn all of the required gems, Cut, Strength, and Surf. Theoretically, I could catch any Pokemon that can learn Surf, but I wanted to avoid teaching my Charizard Strength too, since there's no move deleter in Gen 1. As a side note, I mentioned before that picking any starter should work for this challenge, but that doesn't mean they all have the same route. Specifically because Blastoise can't learn Cut, you'd have to catch a Pokemon that can before fighting Lieutenant Surge, like Paras on Mount Moon for example. But we'll get to that a bit later. After getting Krabby, I was free to get through the rest of the game without getting any more Pokemon, making sure to avoid the dojo and its gift Pokemon. I used Kingler's Strength to solve the switch puzzles in Victory Road, and Surf to get to Cinnabar Island, as well as pass some of the badge gates. And after getting through the entire Elite Four, as well as the Champion Blue with only 2 Pokemon, I became Kanto's new champion, and entered Charizard and Kingler into the Hall of Fame. And yet, I feel like it should be possible to do better. It just feels like, with how infamously broken Generation 1 is, there should be a way to beat it with only 1 Pokemon, even if it means using less conventional methods. Alright, back to the drawing board. So we're trying to find a potential 1 Pokemon run. As far as I can tell, there's no way to skip the starter at the beginning, so that'll be all we have to work with. Of the 3 of them, we only really have 2 options, Charmander or Squirtle. Venusaur can only learn Cut, so for this challenge, it is strictly worse than Charmander. If we pick Squirtle, we're looking at this map coverage. It's okay, but we're still physically locked out of a ton of towns. And that's not to mention that we can only get to a grand total of 2 gyms without Cut. If we go for Charmander, the map opens up a bit more and we get access to almost every town and gym, which is an improvement. However, Charizard can't learn Surf, so there are 2 big problems. We can't access Cinnabar, and we can't get past a couple of the gates in the Pokemon League. So we're looking for something on the towns that Charmander allows us to access, which even though we only have 1 Pokemon, will let us cross full bodies of water. Not only once, but twice. And as luck would have it, the solution for our problem lies under the purple hue of Fuschia. The Safari Zone turns out to be exactly what we need. The one way for us to cross water without Surf is simply to walk through walls. By tricking the game into letting you leave the Safari Zone while the game is running, then taking your last step while jumping from a ledge, you can make the game turn off all collision until you enter a building or a Pokemon fight. Then, by making your Pokemon faint from poison, you can transfer that state to the overworld. And voila! We can walk anywhere we want, and more specifically, we can walk on water and all the way to Cinnabar. I can't understate how convenient this trick is. There's another walk through walls glitch, dubbed Brock through walls, see what they did there, that can be done if you pick Bulbasaur as a starter. But then that would block me from beating Brock until after I go everywhere I need Surf for, like, for example, the Pokemon League. So the fact that we have another way to walk through walls, and that it can be triggered with only 1 Pokemon is almost miraculous. Now, despite that, we need to tread carefully. We're getting into dangerous territory, so stepping somewhere we shouldn't might soft-lock the game or even crash it. After getting to Cinnabar, I need to be very careful not to heal in the Pokemon Center under any circumstances. That's because without Surf, and with the walk through walls glitch disabled since I'll need to enter the gym at some point, my only way out of this island is to lose a battle and white out, which will teleport me back to a previous Pokemon Center. So after beating Blaine, I lost against a Pokemon in the Pokemon Mansion and got teleported back to Fuschia, which gets me the Volcano badge without the need for Surf. With the 7th badge, I can finally challenge and beat Giovanni, and from there the badge check gates are the only barrier standing between me and beating the game, and we're easily able to get past the Surf sections with another trigger of the walk through walls glitch. Even if the badge gates look a little more interesting than normal, they still work as usual, and we're soon entering the incredibly glitchy walls of the Indigo Plateau, where we can once more beat the Elite Four and Champion, this time using a single Charizard. Now that's the result I was looking for. Just as a side note, Pokemon Yellow is the worst pick for this specific challenge, since it will take at least 3 Pokemon to clear it, as you can't catch Krabby until after you'd have to fight Lieutenant Surge, and there's no other Pokemon that can learn Holy Gem moves before you have to use Cut. However, that's only because I specifically ruled out the use of major game-breaking glitches. Bring them back to the table, however, and suddenly Pokemon Yellow is the best pick, because you can actually beat the game with 0 Pokemon. Through a convoluted set of glitches way too complicated for me to understand, much less explain, you can teleport from your house at the start straight to the room just after the champion fight, all before you pick up even a single Pokemon. You can probably do this in the other 2 games somehow, but I wasn't able to confirm this. Anyway, up next, Generation 2. Johto makes it easier than Kanto to pick a game. As far as I can tell, all 3 versions give the same results. They all have the same required gems, and the version exclusive Pokemon don't make any of them better than the others. The only difference is that Crystal has a couple more gift Pokemon, so to avoid picking them up accidentally, I'll go with Silver this time. Gen 2 upped the ante with the required gems, with there now being a whopping 5 of them. Cut, Surf and Strength are back, as well as the newcomers Whirlpool and Waterfall. As you've probably noticed, with 3 of them being water-type moves, Feraligatr is our only hope of beating this gem with only 1 Pokemon. And in fact, Feraligatr can learn Cut, Surf, Strength, Whirlpool, and that's it? Yeah, for some weird reason, Feraligatr cannot learn Waterfall. Like a practical joke designed to get me specifically. It took Game Freak till the next generation to fix this, but for the purposes of this challenge, that's a generation too late. So it looks like we're going into Pokemon Silver expecting to use at least 2 Pokemon. I picked Chikorita just to avoid picking a second fire starter and having 2 water types in my team. Though I came to regret that because Johtos are absolutely infested with bug, flying and poison types. Though that would end up being the least of my problems. Let me introduce you to the worst NPC in Pokemon history. This guy just won't let you move on from Violet City until you get the egg from the professor's aide back at the Poké Center. Even if you go to the aide and decline his offer, he'll refuse to let you through. And the cherry on top is that neither the Togepi that hatches from it, nor its evolution Togetic can learn any of the required A-Gems to beat the game. So it won't even help as an A-Gem user. You might think a solution similar to the one we did for Pokemon Red could help us here, but as far as I know, there's no glitch as helpful as the walk through walls glitch in any Gen 2 game, much less in the first town. I suppose it's technically not a new Pokemon since it hasn't hatched yet, but it takes place in the party, so I have no choice but to declare it as a new Pokemon obtained. And that's basically all that needs to be said for the second generation. With enough levels, Meganium can solo through the entire game, and in Olivine I catch a Magikarp, who after evolving into Gyarados can learn all the water type gems and strength, leaving Meganium's moveset open for more moves. And while I'd rather not have been forced to take Togepi, Togetic can learn Fly, which makes backtracking a lot easier, especially in the post-game. And so, after going through all the gyms, facing the entire Elite Four and unseating the champion, we enter the Hall of Fame once again, this time using 3 Pokemon, Meganium, Togetic, and Gyarados. That brings our total up to 4. And you know what? What the heck. Let's throw in the Red fight as well. Getting to him doesn't take any more gems than the ones we already have, so it's only a matter of actually beating him. After showing Red that quantity doesn't equal quality, we defeated his full party with our own 3 Pokemon. And with that, we're finally ready to advance to the next gen. See what I did there? It's because it's on Game Boy Advance. It's time for Generation 3, and once again the game we choose doesn't actually matter, The battles, encounters and required day gems aren't different enough to make one of them better than the others, so I went with Emerald, exclusively to give the extra battle with Steven at the end a try. Speaking of required day gems, once again 5 of them are mandatory to progress through the whole game. Cut is no longer necessary, but Surf, Strength and Waterfall are back, as well as the newly promoted Rock Smash and the completely new Dive. I'll do a quick go through the starters as it's basically tradition at this point, but they won't help much in this case either. Trico and Torchy can learn only Strength and Rock Smash, while Mudkip can... Wait a minute. Your eyes aren't deceiving you. It only took 3 generations until we finally got a starter that can learn every required HM move. That means we're theoretically looking at a 1 Pokemon run scenario. We shouldn't celebrate too early though, as I mentioned, there are 5 required HMs, so if at any point all 5 HMs are required, then I'm in deep trouble. I went through the adventure as normal, teaching my starter the HM moves as I got them. First Rock Smash in Mauville City, where I immediately used it to actually progress through the game. Then Strength not too late after that, after uniting the Rusturf Tunnel couple. Surf was a nice side grade to Muddy Water after Norman's gym, and the Dive gem that I got after Ted and Liza's gym helped when I ran out of PP for Surf. With these 4 gems I was able to complete the entire story and beat all of the gyms, which finally gave me the gem for Waterfall and access to Victory Road. The thing with Waterfall, however, is that it isn't actually needed until the very end of the game to scale the waterfall leading up to Victory Road, and to actually traverse it, Dive isn't necessary, so we can safely remove it from our moveset. That means that despite the extremely limited moveset, we can make it all the way to the champion Wallace. To be honest, I considered going with Ruby or Sapphire exclusively because of him. Going into this battle, I only had Strength as a good damage dealing move against most of his Pokemon, since the rest of my moveset is either Water type moves or Rock Smash. Still, with a couple of resets, a bit of luck and some healthy item spamming, I managed to defeat him and enter the Hall of Fame with as little as 2 Pokemon. Yes, the curse of mandatory gift Pokemon strikes in this game just like it struck in Johto. These 2 grunts blocking the bridge prevent you from going through the rest of Route 119 and into Fortree City until you beat all the trainers inside the Weather Institute. And to my knowledge, there is no way to avoid being given this cast form after being the admin. And believe me, I tried. From trying to get a bit more mileage out of my gem moves to whatever this was. I even went in deep into the Pomeg glitch as well as the Mail glitch, though none of those were able to help me as both needed way more than 1 Pokemon to work. There is just no way to skip these 2 grunts. Well, actually there is one way. In Ruby and Sapphire you can actually avoid this cast form, you just need to catch 5 older Pokemon. If your party is full, then the scientist will just hold on to the cast form and you can proceed without it. Though, as you can imagine, that isn't exactly an option for me. Not that it matters anyway, for the fight against Ted and Liza you are required to have at least 2 Pokemon, so I'd have to get an extra one regardless. So the grand total is now 6, a full party, as we had the 2 Pokemon needed to beat Pokemon Emerald. And as I mentioned, I did give Steven a couple of tries. Getting past Cradley was starting to seem impossible due to Giga Drain dealing 4 times damage, but with a good amount of luck I was able to do it and beat Emerald's Super Boss without any extra Pokemon. And to wrap up the Game Boy saga, we have the Kanto remakes, with Fire Red and Leaf Green. And as you can expect, there's nothing like the wall through walls glitch in this generation, which means a 1 Pokemon run is impossible this time. The required 8 gems are the same ones from Generation 1, and the starters have the exact same compatibility with them, with the only exception being that Venusaur can now also learn Strength as well as Cut, so it works identically to Charizard. I went with Leaf Green and picked Squirtle just to confirm my earlier theory that using 2 Pokemon with it was also possible. As I mentioned before, Squirtle's run is pretty much the same as the other two starters up until we need Cut, that is. I went with Nidoqueen as the second Pokemon since, just like Krabby, it can learn all 3 required A-Gems, though we couldn't back in Gen 1. Can you guess what A-Gem Nidoqueen wasn't able to learn back then? That's right, it was Cut. From that point, the run goes exactly like our first run 2 generations ago, except that we now have access to the move deleter, so we can get rid of Cut in Fuschia City, which only made it easier to get through the rest of the gyms and all the way to the champion, to once again reach the Hall of Fame with 2 more Pokemon. As I mentioned before, there's no getting through to Cinnabar and into Victory Road without Surf, so 2 is as low as you can get for this one. And that'll do it for part 1 of this challenge. We got through the first third of Pokemon games all while losing a grand total of 8 Pokemon, just under a party and a half. So far, the games that took the most Pokemon to beat were the Johto based ones, but I predict they won't hold on to that title for long. So on the next one, we'll get into the Nintendo DS and see if Sinnoh is the next one to break this record, or if maybe it will restart our hopes of another 1 Pokemon dream. Hey, welcome to the end of the video. This was a pretty fun video to make. It did take a while, so I don't know when the next one's gonna come, but I guess we'll see. It really made me appreciate other videos. I've started working on this one since like December last year, so the best part of 3 months working on this, which, yeah, I've been working on and off, but still. By the way, while I was making this, I found this video by ManJTV. It is which starter Pokemon can solo run their games, and he actually goes through all of the games and tries to figure out which ones can be solo run. Some of my results were different than his, and I'm trying to figure out the total number of Pokemon, so I thought it would be different enough to continue doing this video. But do check it out, it's pretty cool. Also, you probably saw this video from Alphared. I mean, it has 12 million views, and it does basically what I did, but just for Emerald. I mean, I hadn't seen it before, but if you did, you probably got spoiled the whole Mudkip revelation about it learning all the A-Gems, but, you know. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. If you want, you can try to figure out how many the next game will take. Either Diamond, Pearl, or Platinum. I think I have an idea of how many they will take, and it might surprise you. So definitely check that one out. Until then, stay safe.